Good evening. This is a meeting of the Evanston Plan Commission. The members of the Evanston Plan Commission are appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the council. And the function of the commission is to make recommendations and findings to the council relating to proposals. So everything that is said tonight will be not transcribed but recorded, and council members will have access to that. We also make findings which are related to standards are required for approval. And so what we're looking for would be evidence that's related to the standards, because we are constrained to make findings that meets the standards or it doesn't meet the standards, and we recommend approval if it doesn't. And we don't recommend approval if it doesn't meet the standards. But it's really helpful when we have evidence that relates to the standards. So the order of presentation for a hearing is, which comes from our rules and also the statutes and case law, is that the Plan Commission first hears a report from the city staff, and then they hear testimony and evidence from the applicants and the attorneys, or the petitioner and their attorneys. Following that testimony, and usually it's limited to 20 minutes unless the case is complicated. In this case is complicated. Following that, there's a time for people to ask questions of the witnesses who gave testimony and their opinions. And at the end of that part of the hearing, there is an opportunity for people who live a minimum distance from the property to ask for continuance if they wish to bring their own witnesses and didn't bring them tonight. And that's someone who qualifies if they hand me something in writing that says how far they live from the subject property and if they want a continuance. That's mandatory. Then, if there is no continuance, or if there is a continuance at the next meeting, the people who have evidence or wish to speak in opposition to a proposal, they have an opportunity to give evidence and also how do they feel about it. And the petitioners then have a chance to cross-examine those people. Essentially, if you live within 1,000 feet of the property in any direction, and not including the distance over roads, you have that right to get a continuance. So then there's the questions, as I mentioned, and then the applicant can bring in its own evidence to support the petition, and there can be more chances for questions. At the end, we close testimony. We don't take any more evidence, and the petitioner can give a summary of their position, and then other people can make a closing summary, and the petitioner can do the rebuttal. Following that, the commission addresses the relationship between what's been said and the standards. It makes findings on the standards and a recommendation. We're not final authority. We just give a report to the city council, and then the city council looks at the report and they are free to gather additional information, and then subcommittee of the council makes a recommendation, and in order to get authorization for planning and development, an ordinance would have to be passed by the council. So that's a summary of how we can proceed. A lot of people here tonight, and what we ask everyone to do is not to give redundant testimony, because otherwise we'll be here many nights till midnight, and many weeks, months. So if someone else has said what you plan to say, you can just go, she said it, I agree. And that avoids redundant testimony. I may also ask people to give testimony that's relevant to the standards rather than other testimony, so that we can finish. At this point, I'll ask staff to, before we do that, I've explained the procedure. We have one matter before the hearing, which is approval of the minutes from the last meeting.
Second.
The motion has been made and seconded twice. Any discussion or corrections? All those in favor? The minutes are unanimously approved. And now when the staff is ready, they can proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The case in front of us tonight is for 1571 Maple Avenue, request for a special use approval for a planned development. Michael McLean of 1571 Maple Avenue LLC, developer of the proposed project, has applied for a special use for a planned development in the D3 Downtown Core Development District to construct a 12-story, 133.3-foot high, multiple family building with 101 residential units, 3,696 square feet of commercial space, and 13 open parking spaces on site. The applicant seeks site development allowances for the number of dwelling units, building height, floor area ratio, number of on-site parking spaces provided, and building setbacks from the east, north, and northwest property lines. In addition, the applicant may seek, and the Plan Commission may consider, additional site development allowances as may be necessary or desirable for the proposed development. The Plan Commission makes a recommendation to the City Council, the final determining body for this proposal. As I mentioned, the applicant is requesting approval of the special use, and therefore standards for special use outlined in section 63510 need to be reviewed and satisfied for the project to be recommended for approval. In addition to that, there are standards and guidelines for planned developments within the D3 district. That's in the section 611-110. And then we also have design guidelines that were adopted by the City Council for review of planned developments. I'll quickly go through the proposal. It's outlined in the staff report, and I'm sure the applicant will cover some of these items too, so I don't want to be repeating many items. The site is outlined in yellow, 1571 Maple Avenue. It's surrounded by Davis Street to the north, frontage on Elmwood Avenue to the east, Maple Avenue to the west. So this is Davis, Maple, and then down here is Grove Street. The transit stop, this is the Metro Davis Street station, and then the CTA station. The actual entrance for the Metro station is right here, so the property is right to the corner from the transit stop. The property to the south is 1570 Elmwood, also previously known as Winter Club or 1 Evanston. Project characteristics. The property size is approximately one half an acre. Building size is approximately 105,595 square feet, with additional commercial space of 3,696 square feet. There are 101 rental dwelling units proposed. Breakdown of the units is 57 studios and 1 bedrooms, 38 2-bedrooms, and 6 3-bedroom units. Petitioner is proposing a total of 114 parking spaces. Of that, 11 will be provided on site on the service parking lot of Maple Avenue. In the same parking lot, there will be 2 on-site car share spaces, and then there are 101 off-site parking spaces provided at the Maple Avenue garage. The address 1800 Maple Avenue. The proposed height of the building is 12 stories or 133.3 feet. This is the proposed layout on the ground floor. North is to the right. This is Davis and Elmwood. The building is outlined in, again, as I mentioned, it's the ground floor is sort of orange. This is the surface parking lot with access to Maple Avenue. There is currently a curb cut. As I mentioned, site is vacant, but there's a curb cut here. They will be relocating that a little bit to the south. No on-street parking spaces would be eliminated. There are, as I mentioned, total of 13 parking spaces here. 2 will be designated for car share. There are 2 what they call parklets, little small parks with benches open to public. They're on the private property. Maple Avenue is a 2-way traffic lane. Davis Street is 1-way going westbound, and Elmwood Avenue is 1-way going northbound. They are proposing to widen the sidewalk along Elmwood Avenue and still to maintain the through lane to 13 feet where the city's minimum is 12 feet. This is a better close-up view of that. There's on-street parking on the east side of Elmwood Avenue that will remain. No on-street parking spaces are proposed to be eliminated. So this is the ground floor of the building. The commercial space is at the north end of the building in orange. There will be probably 2 entrances, one off of Davis and one off of Elmwood. The main entrance into the building for the residents of the building is right here off of Elmwood. As you enter, there will be a lounge, lobby, the mailroom is over here, and then the fitness space to the south. In the back of the building is the west lobby for the entrance off of the parking lot with bicycle parking for the residents. And then the gray area is basically mechanical equipment and stuff in the building. These are the 2 loading spaces that are required. They're provided off of Elmwood Avenue. I'm going to go quickly through the rest of the floors just so that everyone can understand the layout of the building on the site. This would be the 2nd floor of the building. There would be rooftop landscape areas in these portions that are outlined in green. As you can see, there's a total of 12 units on this floor, and the breakdown is in the lower right. The 3rd floor is exactly the same. The 4th floor is smaller. This is the residential portion of the building. Again, the green areas are landscape areas. The building on the ground levels is located on the lot line along Davis and Elmwood. This 4th floor, starting at 4th floor, the building is set back from the south property line 25 feet, which means the required ziggurat setback from the south property line. They're located 9 feet, and I believe 9 inches off of this northwest property line. And then here it's 24 feet, where 40 feet is required. 25 feet is required from the northwest property line. And then off of Elmwood, the higher portion of the building, starting at the 4th floor, is set back 4 feet at the closest point, but as you can see, the majority of the building is actually more than that. The requirement off of Elmwood, for that portion of the building that's over 42 feet, it would have to be 30 feet. This is the floors 5 through 11, as I mentioned, same as the 4th floor. And then the 12th floor is outlined here, 5 units on the top. This would be the rooftop terrace for the residents that is on the north side of the building, sort of adjacent from, or away from the residential building to the south, which is right here. And then the roof of the 12th floor is again the HVAC mechanical units and then some additional landscape areas. This is the north elevation looking south. This is the portion that's fronting on Davis Street, and then from this corner down would be the Elmwood Avenue frontage. This is the residential portion, high portion of the building, and then again, the same stuff. This would be the outline of the building to the south, which is the 1 Evanston building, 1570 Elmwood. This would be the west elevation looking east. These are the 2 buildings in the front along Maple. They're 2-story buildings. And then the 15-story 1 Evanston building to the right. The CTA tracks are beyond the building over there. This is the elevation looking west. This is the Elmwood frontage. the 3-story base of the building along Davis, and then the 12-story portion of the building there. And then the south portion of the building, this was most recently revised to eliminate many windows based on the presentation that the developer provided to the surrounding property owners. There was concern about lack of privacy, so the windows were eliminated. At the Site Plan Appearance Review Committee, the committee recommended that more windows be added, if appropriate, based on Plan Commission review and additional comments that are received from public. I quickly want to go over the zoning requirements. These are the bulk requirements that the proposal satisfies. As I mentioned, the required setbacks on the ground floor are basically requirement 0, so they are proposing a 0 setback along Elmwood and Davis, and then at the northwest property line, as well as on the south property line for the first 3 stories. And then from Maple Avenue, the building would be 73 feet from that west property line along Maple Avenue. The setback for the higher portion of the building above 42 feet is called a ziggurat setback. The code requires, in this case, 30 feet from Maple Avenue. They are obviously 73 feet as indicated, and then from the south property line, the requirement is 25 feet. They are meeting that requirement 25. Parking setbacks are 5 feet across. They are satisfying those, and as I mentioned, 2 loading docks are required. They're providing 2 loading docks. The bulk requirements that they are not satisfying are considered site development allowances. They're requesting approval of those. There's 7 of them. Number of dwelling units per code based on the lot size. They're permitted to have a total of 73 units. They're proposing a total of 101. The height of the building per code is allowed up to 85 feet, with additional 40 feet for a parking garage that would be allowed, so the total building height would be allowed at 125 feet. They're proposing 133.3 feet. Number of parking spaces that are required based on the number of units, based on the breakdown of bedrooms, and then the commercial space that they have in the building, the total required is actually 141, I believe, not 142. Apologize for that. And then they are proposing a total of 114 parking spaces, 11 on-site, 2 car share also on-site, and then 101 off-site of the Maple Avenue garage. FAR required by code 4.5 maximum. They're proposing 4.8. Under site development allowances that are allowed in the D3 district for planned developments, the council can consider increase to FAR up to 8, I believe. The ziggurat setbacks. So these ziggurat setbacks come into effect when a project is requesting heights higher than what is currently allowed by code. So because they're requesting a height of 133 feet over what's allowed by code, they have to satisfy the ziggurat setbacks for residential portion of the tower over 45 feet. I'm sorry, 42 feet. So the setback from Davis Street is actually the only one that is required no matter what, and that is 40 feet. They're proposing 24. But the setbacks from the northwest property line, from the south property line, from Elmwood Avenue, and then from Maple Avenue, those are only required because the building is requesting higher or taller height than what's allowed by code. The reasoning behind that is that if a proposal is requesting higher height, you're requesting setbacks for that portion of the building that is higher than one that's further away from the property lines. Parking, as I mentioned, a total of 101 parking spaces are proposed off-site at the Maple Avenue garage. This is an overhead view to indicate where that is located. The site is right here on the bottom. The blue line indicates the direct distance between the site and the parking, which is 1,003 feet. If the green dotted line is indicated, that indicates the walking path that a resident would do to access that. As I mentioned, the entrance into the building is on the east side along Elmwood Avenue. Then you would walk north and continue walking north on Maple. Go to church, cross over, and then again north of Maple to the building. That is a total of about a quarter mile walk. So Maple Avenue Garage is a public parking garage that was built in 1990. The reasoning behind the garage, the idea was to spur private development. Building public or structured parking is extremely expensive, and cities most often try to build public parking garages as public benefits, and then going to development agreements with future developments so that parking that's required by code, either for employees or residents or visitors, that is required by code for future developments, that is then provided in the public parking garage, under a lease agreement, of course. So the Maple Avenue parking garage that was built accommodates parking that is required for a number of surrounding developments, including the Hilton, which is just to the north, and then some of the surrounding buildings around there. The parking garage has a capacity of 1,400 parking spaces. These are the average daily counts. City staff goes out there daily, 2 times, 10 a.m. and 2 a.m. to count the number of parking or vehicles that are parked in the parking garage. As you can see, the average daily count at 10 a.m. is 36% occupancy. Based on the 2 p.m. count, the average capacity is 52%. The one-time high for the 2014 happened, I believe, in July at the 10 a.m., which was 885 parking spaces that were occupied. And then in August of this year at 2 p.m., the high was 1,020, which is 72% of the parking garage. There are a total of 893 parking spaces that are currently leased by the city to surrounding developments, any residents that individually want to, that decided to purchase parking, or businesses that purchase parking for their employers. Most of the time, the city goes into an agreement for 40 years for any of the surrounding properties or developers or developments that are looking to get parking on that in there. Street parking. So this is Davis. The next street down is Grove. Anything north of Grove is considered downtown area that is metered. It is metered 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. Monday through Saturday. Sundays and holidays, it is available for public parking. So, and then also between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m., there's no parking allowed. Areas south of Grove and portions of Oak Avenue over here have various parking regulations. Some of that has residential F permit parking, where the residents that live on certain blocks, if they purchase the F parking, they can park there anytime. In some instances, there's limitation for those that do not have that permit to only park there 2-hour maximums between 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. And then there are areas that do not have any restrictions whatsoever, except for the snow emergencies and cleanup during, I think, once a month on Tuesdays or something similar to that. I should also mention that the developer has submitted a parking study that indicates that levels of service that the surrounding property or the streets are operating at currently is satisfactory. It actually functions at levels of service A and B, which is the highest rated. So there's adequate capacity on the roadways to accommodate any new trips and vehicles generated by this development. Because the development is not proposing any on-site parking except for the 13 that I mentioned on site, the vast majority, or 90% of that parking, will be provided at the Maple Avenue garage, which means that any trips and impact generated by these new vehicles will happen around Maple Avenue garage. Maple Avenue garage was designed to accommodate up to 1,800 vehicles. So the roadway around the parking garage was designed to accommodate up to 1,800. As I mentioned, the parking garage is well underserved and has adequate capacity. So therefore, the traffic impact on the area around the site will be very minimal. The applicant has indicated that, or the plans indicate there will be a drop-off area in front of the front door on Elmwood Avenue, and then also the parking lot that would be open to public parking. Short-term public parking can obviously be used for any short-term drop-off or pickup or anything like that. So when we receive a project like this, staff works with the developer to come up with a project that, number one, satisfies the design guidelines for planned developments. That's our main that's one of the first elements that we look at when we receive a project. And I just wanted to show some of these images for this particular proposal and how it developed from the early stages that we received early in this year until what we have today. So what you see on the left here is the first proposal that this particular developer proposed on the site, and it was going to be an extended stay hotel, 12 stories that was going to look like this. This is Elmwood Avenue, and then this is Davis Street. This would not meet design guidelines. And staff pointed that out to the developer and suggested the project needs to be redesigned and looked at not only from the design of the building, but also from the use. The extended stay hotel is not the optimal use for that site, especially considering there was another extended stay hotel around the same time that was being considered by the city council. So this type of project would not be compatible with the surrounding area, and as you can see, there's a 3-story building right next to it. So then the developer went back and redesigned the project to look something like this. This was their second submittal. It included the base of the building that's shorter, 3 stories on Davis Street, and then they had the 11-story portion of the building that is similar to what we have, what is currently proposed. We still didn't feel that that proposal met the design guidelines. We felt that it lacks articulation, some of the detail that could improve the building. There's differentiation in different colors, different materials. We felt that all that needs to be reduced and to be more compatible with the surrounding area. The developer went back and again redesigned the building to what you see here in the lower right. That's very similar to what they came in with today. This is a more contemporary building that has multiple volumes. On the base, the 3-story base, which is what the design guidelines call for, the base differentiates the area that's adjacent to the 3-story buildings and sort of pedestrian environment on Davis Street with the higher portion of the building that's sort of set back from the front of the building along Davis. This building was much better. It added some balconies, it had some articulation, some volumes that were coming in and out. There's some green roofs on top of these the volumes, so it was a much better improvement on the project when it's considered towards the design guidelines. We still felt that you could add a little bit more detail to the building and articulation to improve the look of the building, and so this is finally what they came up with. And this building now includes a more traditional base, the cornice elements, windows that are more traditional that complement the look of the buildings on Davis Street. The storefronts for commercial units are less contemporary in nature. They fit better with those surrounding them. They have an E-wall. You have, as I mentioned, you have green roofs on top here, also one on the 11th floor, I believe. And then there's more articulation in the brick portion of the building. So we felt, and we strongly believe, that this project does satisfy the design guidelines. We not only look at the design of the building, we also look at the interaction of the building with the streets in the public realm. This is the intersection of Davis and Elmwood. We felt that this corner needs to be improved to provide transition towards the CTA and the metro stops that are just to the east. And then the expansion of the sidewalk would accommodate for some street life, some sidewalk cafes, additional bike parking for not only residents but also for public. We felt that those are important elements to add to this project. Public benefits. There's a number of public benefits that are proposed that staff has been able to negotiate with the developer. I'm just going to list them here. This process is usually part of the continued negotiation following the Planning Commission presentation, and it's something that is usually finalized at the city council level, and all these public benefits are spelled out in the ordinance. I'm going to highlight some of these. The incorporation of commercial space along Davis Street is a very important element that we felt needed to be addressed and provided. They are providing that 3,696 square feet of that. The building will be LEED Silver certified. The parking lot, the surface parking lot on site will be pervious parking lot to reduce the stormwater runoff that the proposal will generate. There will be one free electric charging station in the public parking lot off of Maple Avenue. As I mentioned, the 101 parking spaces that will be leased from the city-owned garage would generate a total of $103,000 per year. This is something that will be in the ordinance. The developer would have to purchase that and sign a lease, as I mentioned, probably 40 years, and regardless of how many residents, future residents of the building would need parking, the number of 101 would have to be leased no matter what. Sidewalk expansion I mentioned, the green roofs I mentioned. The 2 car share parking spaces would be located on site, and obviously anybody that's a member of these car share companies, you can access them anywhere they are located. The developer will provide car share membership, reduced car share membership fees for the residents to encourage them to have car share rather than their own personal vehicles. As I mentioned, 11 parking spaces that are open to public on site, short term. It's a huge benefit for the area residents and visitors to the commercial areas, especially along Davis and some of the commercial areas on Elmwood Avenue that are currently vacant. Sort of, it's a challenge to fill them in. Bike parking facilities around Davis and Elmwood. One thing that I forgot to mention is the beautification of the Metra embankment on the east side of Elmwood Avenue with sort of a living green wall. Landscape seating in the parklets that are on private property off of Maple Avenue. And then finally, a 6-foot easement, which is actually along the north side of the parking lot, surface parking lot, that would be for the commercial tenants of the buildings on the west along Davis. They currently unload their dumpsters and trash. Basically, the trash pickup is on Davis. This would allow them to access off of the parking lot down towards Maple, so that the garbage pickup is not on Davis, which is a very visible pedestrian-friendly commercial corridor, but then Maple. So those are all the public benefits, and we're still working on some additional public benefits, such as divvy bike support and that kind of stuff. But those are the items that are usually done later on in the process. So standards for planned developments I mentioned earlier, the design standards and guidelines for planned developments within the D3 district. There's also the 2000 comprehensive general plan and then the 2009 downtown plan. Staff believes that the proposal is in compliance with all these requirements. I've highlighted some of the items that characterize this development. It's a specific TOD development. I mean, it's right across the street from a TOD stop. It provides an infill development on a vacant sod that and further promotes walking and use of public transit. It is compatible with surrounding development and land uses. The building is positioned north-south, even though the layout of the site would lead to an east-west orientation of the building, similar to the 15-story to the south. They've chosen to do, and we've been able to work with the developer to design the building with a north-south orientation to minimize the impact on the surrounding properties, specifically on the building to the south that has a large exposure to north and south. Some of the other elements, it is integrated within the existing neighborhood, and it will contribute to provide public benefits, as I mentioned earlier. It will enhance the pedestrian scale along Davis Street with a 3-story base of the building that's more traditional in design. It will further the goal to maintain the downtown attractive, economically vital center for that diverse activity, with 101 additional units and residents in the area. It will promote sustainable green building. The building will be LEED Silver certified and have a significant number of green elements. It will accommodate bike travel, further the city's bike plan implementation. As I mentioned, the installation of the parklets off of Maple Avenue. Additional public parking for area residents and visitors. So when looking at this project in a comprehensive view, including the request for site development allowances, we believe that this project satisfies all standards and guidelines outlined in the D3 zoning district, and it is consistent with the comprehensive plan as well as the 2009 downtown plan. And then finally, the standards for special use, probably the most important part. There are 9 standards for evaluating every one of these projects. We believe that all but 2 are satisfied. The other 2, standards 7 and 8, are actually not applicable because the property does not have any significant historical or architectural resources. And it's a vacant site, so it does not preserve any natural and environmental features. In essence, I don't want to read all these through, but standard number 1, request that their planned development is specifically listed as an allowable special use within the D3 district, and it is. Planned developments are listed as an allowable special use. Standard number 2, it is in the keeping the purposes and policies of the adopted comprehensive general plan and the zoning ordinance as amended from time to time. As I mentioned, it is consistent with both. It will not cause a negative cumulative effect. This is something that I mentioned when we considered this project and what other possible projects and land uses could be located on this site. We believe that this project will not cause a negative cumulative effect. It will minimize the effect on the surrounding properties, especially on the property to the south. It does not interfere with or diminish the value of the property in the neighborhood. It can adequately be served by public facilities that are within Elmwood Avenue and Maple Avenue. It does not cause undue traffic congestion in the area, primarily because traffic that is for the building, 90% of that will be provided off-site at 1800 Maple Avenue. So any traffic generated by the development will happen at that site. I mentioned the standards number 7 and 8, and then finally standard number 9. It does comply with all applicable regulations in the district except for the site development allowances that we considered, that we mentioned. We do believe that those site development allowances are necessary to provide public benefits as indicated. And with that, we believe, well, staff recommends that the proposal be recommended for approval to the City Council. Staff has included several conditions in our report. Some of the conditions, if there are any questions by the Commission, I'd be happy to answer them. One of them that I should mention is that we believe that a fence needs to be installed, sound abating fence on the roof of the building because the HVAC units are on top and the building to the south is still taller, and there are some units that will be overlooking that. So we believe that a sound abating fence is or should be required. And with that, open to any questions.
It won't be time yet for questions. This is a staff findings. This is not the Plan Commission findings. The Plan Commission has to make findings based on the evidence and testimony at the hearing. The evidence and testimony includes the submittals, written submissions from the petitioner, as well as what is said. And at the conclusion of people addressing the commission, then there'll be a chance for questions and cross-examination, and not only based on what was said, but also what was submitted. And the submissions and the staff report are all available online, where they are listed as the packet for tonight's hearing. So with that said, we recognize the petitioner to present some evidence.
Thank you.
Maybe some arguments.
No arguments yet. Can we follow the portable second method? Thank you very much.
It's hard for me to jump to the...
I'm not asking you to do
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
One question, Commissioner. Oh, yeah. I'd ask all the witnesses to raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that you will tell the truth at this hearing?
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission, my name is Bernard Citron. I'm with the law firm of Thompson Coburn. I'm here today with me with Ms. Talaro Vanian, my associate, and we're here today representing 1571 Maple Avenue LLC, who is the developer of this proposed project. We welcome the opportunity to present it to the Planning Commission today and to the public. We've been working very diligently, as you've seen through the staff report, to refine a project to what we believe is the best that can be on the site. This site is a vacant lot in the middle of a developed area. It is a very unique site, as you are well aware. It is in the downtown core. It was undeveloped or underdeveloped for this type of site. It is also a unique shape, and because of the above, you see the project that's here today. As you will hear our witnesses testified to, there is a need for this project today. The businesses in your own town are asking for this type of development to provide housing for the business generators in your town, for the people who need it, for their employees, starting with the employees of Northwestern, with the employees of the hospitals in your town, down to the assistant managers and managers of the restaurants in your downtown that you've carefully cultivated. They need a place to live where they can walk to work, so they don't need a car, because that's an aspect of affordability, and we are providing that with this project. It's not for everybody as you're here. There's 101 units. We're not suggesting that this project should be bigger than it is, but there is a need and definitely will be filled for these 101 units. And it is the best solution for this site, balancing the requirements of Evanston and the requirements of the developer. And it is sensitive to the neighborhood. You're gonna hear a lot of people tell you it isn't, and that is just wrong, as you've seen by the drawings yourself, as you've seen by the staff report. I'd like to introduce our members of our team today. Mr. Michael McLean from 1571 Maple Avenue will be testifying shortly. His architect, Howard Hirsch, though a lot of the architectural testimony has been addressed with the staff report. Michael Worthman, who's on KLOA, our traffic consultants. Mr. Steve Lennon, who's our planning expert. And finally, Mr. Michael Morose, who's our appraisal witness to testify. And we hope through their testimony to address all the standards that have been pointed out by Mr. Ladunogit. With that, I'd like to call Mr. Michael McLean.
No. Oh, I could switch. You want to stay here?
Michael, for the record, please state your name, address, and relationship to the project.
Michael McLean, 642 Sheridan Square, Evanston, Illinois.
So you're a resident of...
I am a resident of Evanston, and I'm the developer of the project.
Michael, just in your own words, describe what you're trying to accomplish here with this project.
You know, as a resident, I actually had never even thought about developing in Evanston, separation of work and home. Until I lost my home about 2 years ago, and realized that there weren't very many options for me to move to another property. We had a condo on Sheridan Square. We were forced to move into an apartment building, a family of 3 with 2 dogs. We ended up living at Amley. Amley was only open for a few months at the time, and we were kicking and screaming. But we had to go there. It opened my eyes to how underserved our community was for a product type that could actually accommodate not just young families, but actually younger professionals who actually may not even have had families and wanted to live in an urban environment in Evanston. What we saw in this site was the opportunity to develop at a transit hub in this dead center of downtown Evanston, a rare property that could service and offer to that unique buyer the affordable option of not having a car, of living in a downtown, of walking to work and walking to transportation and walking to shopping and living within their community and within their means. I could not afford to live at Amley if the insurance company had to pay for it for a year, and I'm very happy to be back in my home now that it's been restored. But we set out to provide a product in a location that was responsibly developed to its location in downtown Evanston, in an urban environment, at the transit hub of the downtown, surrounded by shopping, on bicycle corridors, on pedestrian corridors, and on one of our very, very, very rare land resources that are left in Evanston that's large enough to develop a project of this nature.
Now, Michael, you touched on sort of that market, young professionals and otherwise, but what do you really see as being the market in more specifics here? And in fact, you've heard from people from businesses in Evanston, have you not?
Yes, in fact, most specifically, Dan Kelch wrote a really actually surprising driving letter to the mayor and city council, which he did share with us as well, and maybe in the planning files, really supporting the idea of this project because he and all of the businesses along that stretch and many in downtown have told us that they continually lose employees, skilled employees, to downtown Chicago because Evanston does not provide adequate living options for the lifestyles preferred by many of those young professionals that are starting their careers and looking for smaller spaces with more efficient living options and again walkable to work and transportation.
So this would not be family housing for people who may have jobs that require commuting by automobile?
Correct. We feel like there's a good amount of that in Evanston. A few years ago, we all know there were not a lot of Class A rental options in Evanston. Today, it's growing, and we have a really high-quality stock of rental apartments. Primarily, they focus on 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, and 3-bedroom units that are averaging in the 1,000 to 1,200 square foot range. Our project has designed away from that, where our units are primarily smaller, or all smaller, averaging about 170 or 870, 880 square feet per unit. Some are significantly smaller than that, some are slightly larger. The idea is to embrace what we are all seeing and hearing in the development planning communities, a new preference to own less stuff and buy less stuff and live a much more simple urban life when you choose to. Not everybody chooses that way. I don't currently choose that way, to live that way. But we don't have very many options for people to do that in this town, and I think we are losing quality residents, quality employers, because we don't offer that option.
When you specifically less stuff, that also includes less automobiles. Have you found that to be the case in these type of developments, both in Chicago and in Evanston in very similar areas?
Correct. The parent sponsor of this project is Centrum Partners. Centrum has been developing, headquartered in Chicago, for around 30 years. We currently have embraced the transit-oriented development with more than 6 proposed transit-oriented development projects throughout the Chicago metropolitan area. This is a mid-sized transit-oriented development for us. We have smaller ones along the Brown Line. We have larger ones right down in River North, as well as another a mid-sized one along the Blue Line. Chicago very recently has passed transit-oriented development ordinance. We understand that Evanston has not, yet we felt that we could bring our experience both with the public process of transit-oriented development as well as the actual planning of it down to the dirt to Evanston and see if we could work within what has been going on as far as other transit options and bicycle corridors and other things we're currently investing in.
This property is really, in some ways, the unique property located not against one, but 2 transit lines immediately in the downtown core area with the whole neighborhood of walkability with it. Is there any other properties that really have all these attributes?
So our knowledge, there are no vacant properties with the highest density zoning already attached to it that are directly adjacent to the transit hub of Evanston. You do have very large projects around this transit hub, including Sherman Plaza, but that is a condominium situation where you have large units for families, and then you also have the One Evanston project, which again with large units, big parking garages. The rest of downtown Evanston is pretty much built out. There are a few spots here and there, but nothing again directly at the transit hub.
We already accepted, well, the property is zoned for this, as pointed out in the staff report, for high-density development. But even with that, we are asking for some development allowances, and some of them I'll go through with Howard, but the 2 specifically I want to ask you about is both height and number of units. Why do we need those allowances when we already have a very high density in this project?
It's a good question. It's something we really struggled with, actually, and our planners and architects can speak more about the physicality of the issues. But the site's complicated. It's not a very square site. It has a very large neighbor to the south, and it has very small neighbors to the north. To blend the concept of a modern, large building and a very small traditional building on a site that could be as narrow as 70 feet and as wide as 250 feet in a flag-shaped lot really created a challenge. As you can see, the lot, one of the reasons why the development community had not embraced this project, it was on the market for over a year before we actually went to contract with it. We've been working on it for a year now, as far as the planning goes. It has been vacant, my understanding has been for decades. The difficulty is that it wants the front maple. And if it fronts maple, then it impacts neighbors on all sides of it. We saw the opportunity and worked with staff to figure out how to develop the site so that it actually accentuated some of the benefits of the site, which is the east-west views, and avoided its neighbors while blending the height of the neighbor to the height of the other neighbor, as well as the architectural styles of traditional and modern. So the building is orientated as efficiently as possible. However, it still is an inefficient building. We had requested less setbacks from our neighbors than were suggested by the PD ordinance. And that would have allowed us to build a more efficient building. After multiple meetings and conversations offline as well as publicly, we decided to eliminate the development request, push the tower to a smaller footprint, creating a even more inefficient building, and having to recover the units that we would have lost from that inefficiency to another floor. Having already had the site allowance request for the height, we thought that eliminating one completely while slightly adding to another one was a better option.
Could you develop this site, especially in the manner that's being proposed with the public benefits, with less units than what we're showing here? I'm not talking about one. I mean, the development allowance is to go from, I don't remember how many units, but up to 101 units. Could you financially develop this site with those number of units?
It would be very difficult, and there's two reasons that are behind that. One, the physical nature of it, and again, the experts can really talk about columns and beams and concrete versus steel and all of those travel corridors and fire and life safety. But I believe them, they've been doing this for a long time. It would be very, very difficult, and the cost of construction is already getting to a point where this building is really pushing that dynamic. The second is that we're asking for a development allowance for number of units, but not necessarily number of residents. If we had half the number of units and all 3 bedrooms, we could have 4 times the number of residents as we do in studios, which drive, particularly studios, which really attract a single tenant. A 1-bedroom which may attract 1 1/4 tenants. A 3-bedroom attracts 3 or 4 tenants. A 2-bedroom attracts 2 or 3 or 4 tenants. So when we asked for the development allowance with the number of units, we did that in recognition that we actually think our resident count will be lower than it would be in a more traditional condominium style building with larger footprint units and many more bedrooms and that type of planning.
Is there a spin-off benefit from what you've seen, and you've done the urban living for a long time? These are small units. You say they don't have a lot of stuff. Do these people, they don't entertain in their unit? Do they go out? What do they do? What do they contribute to the neighborhood in Evanston?
Cash. There's definitely a movement with older family age 35 to 55, 65 that want the entertaining room, the great room, the big kitchen with the island and the stove and the works, right? We all work towards that, and then we throw a big dinner party for Thanksgiving, and we enjoy it, and that's great. But there's a huge population in this country that don't want to cook, and don't want to clean, and don't want to do laundry, and don't want to make their bed, and don't want to clean up for guests, and don't want places to just store stuff. So we feel that there's absolutely an opportunity here to provide an efficient amount of space that people don't have to maintain, they don't have to heat, they don't have to clean, but they can still live a quality lifestyle. And the reason why they can live that quality lifestyle is because all the entertainment, all the dining, all the shopping is right out their front door, quite literally.
I have nothing further from Mr. McLean at this point. You'll be here to answer any questions. I don't know if the commission wants to ask them now or later, or how we're going to do this.
We'll hold questions unless commissioners need something verified right away.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Howard? I think to turn this, I don't know, you figure it out. Mr. Hirsch, could you please state your name and address for the record and detail your experience and what your relationship is to this project?
My name is Howard Hirsch. I'm the president of Hirsch Associates Architects and Planners, located in Chicago, Illinois. And we've been hired to be the designer and architect of record for this particular project.
Howard, just very briefly, is this a typical project for Hirsch and Associates? Is it an urban infill site? Have you done a number of these projects?
Yeah, we've been in business for 20 years. In fact, our anniversary is this month. And we've specialized in what I call urban mixed-use infill developments. Back in the day, it was more condos. When the condo craze was here, now it tends to be more rental. In general, almost 50% of our work has been in this type of building, where it be urban location, infill location, whether it be in a neighborhood or a suburban location like Evanston, and usually has a component of retail on the ground floor, perhaps some parking, perhaps not, residential units, amenities, and the like.
Would it be fair to say that the first designs for this project were probably a simpler building, a more cost-efficient building to design?
When we first looked at the site, we weren't really thinking about doing anything that would require these kind of allowances. We were looking at what would the standard zoning allow. And you know, in this particular zoning district, what it allows is a 4-story podium that covers the entire site, and then a building 85 feet on top of that, which is the more standard type building you would have seen built years ago, with lots of parking in the base and you know, larger type units up above. But because of the shape of the site, because of its location, we really felt that that would be a building that would be more imposing on the site, and that we were looking for ways to do a thinner building, a building that would have less impact on the property. And one of the ways to do that was to really look at this without the parking component, and you know, working to do it as an off-site parking. And given what Mike has just said, you know, really was a logical next step on the project. And once we did that, we could really work within, with a few, what I think, relatively minor development allowances, given the shape of the site, to create this particular design.
You've testified that you're very familiar with this type of projects, these sort of urban infill projects. In your opinion, have you designed a building, and as we're presenting today, that basically has the least impact that it can on the neighbors, while still maintaining a building that's feasible to do?
I mean, we really think, because we're both architects and planners, that on every project we try to minimize, we try to do two things. We try to really work within the context of the site, and we try to minimize impacts on the neighboring properties. Of all the projects we've done, I gotta tell you, this is actually one of my favorites in terms of both its design and the way it's actually laid out. And you know, every care has been taken to try to create a building that's going to be both financially successful, be aesthetically pleasing, and be something that we think Evanston should be able to embrace, as well as all the neighbors should be able to embrace.
Howard, could you go to probably a site plan so we can talk about some of the other allowances here? I don't know. This is a pain.
Just roll the wheel.
There you go. So site plan? Site plan, because I want to talk about, it was pointed out that we're asking for some development allowances. Upper floor would probably be best. Some development allowances regarding the ziggurat setback. I did pronounce that right for the first time. In terms of our southern property line, we are not asking for any allowance there. We are at the required 25 feet.
Correct. We're at the required 25 feet. In fact, from what we can tell, the neighboring building is also at approximately a 25-foot setback from will be their northern property.
So we're actually 50 feet away from them.
Correct.
But we are asking for some development allowances for ziggurat setbacks, so let's try the western property line. Why do we need that to reduce that setback at that point?
Well, you gotta think of what a ziggurat setback is intended to do. And the ziggurat setback is for buildings that are over a certain height to set back from the street, to set back from the sidewalk, to make sure that you're getting light to the sidewalk. And our site being a sort of L-shaped site, our building is significantly further away from the street than it would be with, if this was a rectilinear site. So really, it's a sort of a detailed way the ordinance is written in that it talks about the property line as not necessarily being a street property line. And so to think about it, if you were to put a 30-foot ziggurat setback along the west and then put a 30-foot setback along the east, you would not have a developable site. And I don't think the ordinance was ever intended to create sites that were not developable. The intention was to protect the street. And so our distance is over 70 feet from Maple.
So on the western property line, it makes sense to push it a little farther to the line because otherwise you just lose all developable area inside.
Correct.
Now, let's go to the northern property line. We have asked a reduction from 40 feet to 24 feet. Is the answer basically the same, that because the site narrows out, if you supplied 40 feet, you wouldn't have an economical builder?
Right, if you put all the ziggurat setbacks together, there'd be nothing left to build upon. We actually had a little more setback here and had pushed the building further to the south. In this redesign, we actually pushed not only the building to the north to get more setback along the south, but we did just slip it a little bit further to the north as well. There's some discussion as to whether we even need a ziggurat setback along the north, and the idea is that it really does help set back the scale of the 2- and 3-story buildings that are along Davis Street from the tower to the south. Now, is that being achieved with a 24-foot setback versus a 40-some-foot setback? And I believe it is achieving that, and therefore it is serving the same function, whether it asks for an allowance or not.
Is it really the same answer along our, I guess,
Yeah.
eastern property line, which is Elmwood Avenue?
Correct. The Elmwood is sloped so that you really only have about a 30, I think it's like a 32-foot property line along the north property line. Along the south property line, we have a significant setback. Here it's 40-some feet. So, the average setback is way more than what we're asking for, which is the variance along the sort of the worst-case scenario, which is right here along Elmwood. And it really solely has to do with the fact that the site is sloping as it goes to the north and getting much thinner and narrower as you go to the north.
So really, the location and the geometry of the site is what drives these development allowances.
Correct.
Do any of these development allowances, the ones I've asked you to testify to, have any negative impact on any surrounding properties?
No, because if you think about how the setback, for example, on Elmwood would work, we could conceivably have a building that ran continuously along Elmwood in this location here, and it would put the building's southeast corner further east, yet still meet all the ziggurat setbacks. That building being further east would have significantly more impact on the neighbor to the south than the way we've designed it by pushing the building to a straight north-south, opening up the site and opening up the view to the northeast.
I'm going to ask just a couple of those sort of standard questions. During your research, because this is a standard for planned developments, is the building adequately served by all public utilities, everything that's needed to build this building at this location?
Yes, it's a typical urban site. Everything that we would need is right around it.
And other than the development allowances we're asking for, as pointed out by Demir, we meet all the underlying zoning on this site.
That is correct.
What have you tried to do in addition to keeping the Davis Street facade or Davis Street building lower to sort of accentuate the walkability and integrate this into the community? I know that we had some discussions about this when we were meeting.
There's a couple of what I think are good views that talk about this. The building is really designed almost like a series of different buildings or kits of parts or different pieces. And the purpose of this is to create a variation in scale as you're walking down the street, so it doesn't feel like a slab of building either 4 stories or higher, right along the edge of the street. So we've got a 3-story element at the corner. That element then steps back to the tower, which comes down to define the entrance to the building. Always dislike it when a building doesn't come down to the ground at least somewhere, when these things are set back. Then we have a 1-story version which will house some of the lobbies and amenities with windows showing activity, exercise rooms, other functions to the street, but also set back to allow for some landscaping. And then it goes back to a 3-story element which hides the base of the building directly to the south, which is just a concrete block wall, getting back to the scale that is already established by that particular building. That houses some units on top as well as the loading dock facility directly adjacent to the loading dock facility of the building to the south. When you look at that from on Davis Street, doing this, okay, you can see how the building transitions to the 3-story and 2-story buildings. It keeps that Davis Street frontage. You can see that that ziggurat setback is more than significant enough to have the tower setback and not impact that look at all. And yet it still holds the corner, putting a retail use with lots of glass and activity at that corner. And then finally along, this is along Elmwood. Again, you start to see the sense of the scale, the fact that the building is angled back, and the very setbacks that occur, some additional landscaping. So again, it was an intention to try to meld the traditional with the modern, the different scales. Rarely do you get a site that has so many different scales immediately adjacent to it, including one of the scales, which is the railroad tracks directly across the street.
Thank you, Howard. I have nothing further from Mr. Hirsch at this point in time. Mr. Worthman, first of all, could you please state your name and your affiliation and what they were asked to do for this site?
Good evening. My name is Michael Worthman. I am a principal at the firm of Koenig, Linger, and O'Hara Boone Inc., KLOA Inc. I am a registered professional engineer in the state of Illinois and have been practicing traffic engineering for 25 years now. We were retained to conduct a traffic impact study for the proposed development.
And let's get it out there. What is your opinion as to whether or not this project as proposed would have any significant impacts on traffic and congestion in this area, in this neighborhood?
Well, the main thing we got to understand, and I think it's been talked about a number of times, is that the volume of traffic generated by this development and the need to have a vehicle is significantly reduced given the fact that it is a transit-oriented development. Truly is a TOD development for a number of reasons. The main thing is its proximity to alternative modes of transportation. We are 1 block from, not even a block, we're across the street from the transit hub, where the CTA station and the metro station are located. 5 to 6 bus routes run along Davis Street in front of the site. Davis Street, Church Street, Maple Avenue are all designated as bike routes. As you well know, you have buffered bike lanes both on Davis and Church. Car sharing vehicles are provided in the area at the Benson Garage. And more importantly, it's just the proximity of the development, the location of it in the downtown area. The residents can walk to grocery stores, to shops, restaurants, and so forth. Further, another significant aspect is the additional measures that will be provided within the development that will further promote the use of alternative modes of transportation. As you've heard, the site will provide 2 parking spaces for car sharing vehicles. There will be a bike rack provided at the Davis-Maple intersection for the public. There will be indoor bike parking for the residents. And there's a number of improvements to the sidewalks and the intersections. All of this will reduce the volume of traffic that's generated by the development. This is shown in the census data for the area, where approximately only 35 to 40% of the residents actually use a car to commute to work. So the majority of the residents in this area are using alternative modes of transportation to commute to and from work.
So even if we're off in terms of the number of people who may own cars, these people aren't using a car to get to work every day. That's not why you live here.
No, I mean, there's a percentage of it that do drive, but the majority of it, and given the proximity, will use these alternative modes of transportation
So if you rented it and you had a car, you'd maybe be using it mainly on a weekend, and in fact, you're warehousing it for 6 days a week.
Yes.
And so it would not be, it's not then unusual to have to walk to that car to warehouse it.
No, not at all.
Which is actually similar to a whole lot of Evanston, where there's multifamily buildings that developed many years ago that has no parking nearby. Or no parking on site, let me rephrase that.
Correct,
Those people walk to their cars anyway, even on a daily basis.
correct.
So this is would you say this is a true urban site, just like you may find in nearby neighborhoods to downtown Chicago?
Yes, it has many of the same characteristics.
So it may be in Evanston, but this is a downtown type of site.
Correct.
And so the traffic patterns for the residents more reflect that type of site than it may even 4, 5, or 6 blocks away.
Correct.
Now, by putting the cars elsewhere, that's one of the main reasons we don't affect localized traffic in and around this building.
Correct. The majority of the parking will be provided at the Maple Avenue parking garage. And the majority of the traffic will be generated in that area as people enter and exit their parking space. The volume of traffic around this site and around the neighborhood as such will be significantly reduced due to that fact.
Actually, is it fair to say that we actually have less traffic than the building right immediately south to us, which is a condo building with probably more cars going in and out of it?
I'm not sure of the total number of units, but yes, given the fact that we are minimizing parking provided at our site, yes, we should generate less traffic to the specific area around the site.
Do you believe do you have an opinion as to whether or not the way this project is constituted would have a negative impact on this neighborhood in any way? In terms of parking, you've heard the staff report that said there's mainly in this immediate neighborhood either permit parking or metered parking. So we can't take up parking from the businesses. Our residents couldn't take up the business parking.
No, the majority of the parking, as you've heard, is either metered parking or some sort of timed parking, where you really can't park in the neighborhood during the day unless you want to pay a meter or you want to move your car every 2 hours. We feel that the distance of the Maple Avenue garage provides a good alternative for the residents. It's covered parking, it's reasonably priced parking, given the other alternatives in the area. Like I said, it's covered and secured. It's a similar distance to the proximity of the other free or available on-street parking within the neighborhood.
So the fact that our parking is off-site is not going to have any negative impact, for instance, on the businesses along Davis Street?
Not that I foresee, and the fact that we are providing 11 additional free parking on site should help the situation.
And it actually wouldn't affect our neighbor, because they have their own parking, the residential neighbor next to us, they have their own residential parking, and their guests could still park in those shorter term spaces, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. I have nothing further, Mr. Worthman, at this time.
Thank you.
May I ask a question of Mr. Worthman?
Sorry, Mike, here, you can use the microphone.
Is this an appropriate time to ask him a question about?
I'll just leave that too late.
Okay, I'll wait.
You're at about 29 minutes out of 20 minutes.
I apologize, I took a little bit of advantage because you said this was a more complex project. We have 2 more witnesses, and we'll try to keep it as brief as possible while hitting the stand.
They need to get the testimony in front of the commission.
Mr. Leonard, could you please state your name, professional qualifications for the record?
Yes, my name is Steve Leonard, L-E-N-E-T. I am a land use and zoning consultant with professional offices in 205 North Michigan Avenue, Chicago, Illinois. I have 45 years of experience in the field of planning and zoning, landscape architecture, including that has been times where I was a resident of Evanston and served on the Zoning Amendment Committee of Evanston. I worked on approximately 15 projects over the years in the city of Evanston during my career.
And what was your assignment in regards to the project at 1571?
My assignment here specifically was to review the proposed development, to review it relative to the City of Evanston General Comprehensive Plan, Downtown Plan, as well as the City of Evanston zoning ordinance and the standards contained therein for consideration of the plan development.
From a planning standpoint, I'll ask the simple question, is this project appropriate in its location under this zoning?
Yes, this project's absolutely appropriate for this specific location. It is appropriately zoned. It's zone D3 in the core of the downtown. It is consistent with the kind of development of the area and surrounding land uses. The fact that it steps down, the fact is, it's been pointed out by the staff very adequately that it meets the standards and recommendations contained in the comprehensive general plan, is generally consistent with the downtown plan, and the allowances that are being requested are rather minor given the nature and character of this site.
So you were familiar with this site or this neighborhood from a prior project, correct?
Yes.
What project?
The adjoining project, 1 Evanston Place, I was the planner on that project.
So I assume at that point you testified, not having it with us, but that you testified that that project was appropriate for that location?
Yes, and that it would have no adverse impact on surrounding properties or would have an impact on the normal and orderly development of the area.
I think that's a key issue here, is the normal and orderly development of the area.
It is one of the significant standards for a special use, absolutely.
So that project, didn't have, in your testimony, which was accepted by the Plan Commission, did not have any impact. I can only assume that that project contemplated a similar development nearby.
Well, it was, we were certainly cognizant of the D3 zoning on the site, which is the highest density zoning, and assumed that a multi-family type of development, whether it was rental or condominium, would ultimately be developed on that site, especially given its proximity to the urban core and the transit center.
You've seen the development, you've read the staff report. Is it your opinion that the proposal has been designed in such a way to have the most minimal impact on the surrounding area?
Yes, it's important. It's been mentioned a couple of times, but it's significant, especially from a planning and zoning standpoint. This is a very irregularly shaped site. It's not only L-shaped, but as you go north along Elmwood, it narrows. So when you look at what you call allowances, but I look at really as variations from the strict requirements of the zoning ordinance. One of the standards for considering variation is the size, shape of the property is unusual or not consistent with other properties in the immediate area. And that certainly applies to this property, which makes the design and the necessity to be able to work within the plan development constraints very appropriate.
Now, you've probably answered this, but I'm going to phrase it exactly as the standard is written. Is this project compatible with the surrounding development and not such a nature in height, bulk, or scale as to exercise any influence contrary to the purpose and intent of the zoning ordinance?
In my opinion, it absolutely is. It steps down as it goes to the north. It doesn't create a corridor effect along Davis Street. I think it's a very appropriate scale. The articulation works very well with this site, and I think that overall it is a very good design and use given the unusual nature of this site.
From a planning standpoint, I keep on saying that, and you're a planner, so from your standpoint, in your opinion, I don't like excess words, does this function well in terms of the neighborhood both to the west, which is a lower scale commercial neighborhood, and the downtown neighborhood to the east?
Yeah, it brings the scale, as you go to the north, it brings it down to a very pedestrian scale, so it works very well from that standpoint. And it works within the context of the urban core and the transit-oriented development as contemplated here right at the transportation center.
Now, I know this is going to come up later, but you did testify that you looked at the downtown plan.
Yes, I did.
First off, what is a planning document like a downtown plan?
Well, the downtown plan is a little different than most planning documents. It's far more detailed. Generally, a comprehensive plan is a long-range guide to the future development of the community. It looks at the physical, economic, social, and institutional aspects of the community and serves as a guide in Illinois. It is not a land use ordinance, but is a guide to future development of the community. The downtown plan is a form-based code, and as a result, it goes into significantly greater detail regarding specific designs and the architectural design of buildings within the area of study.
But that plan is not code, correct? That is not the zoning ordinance of the city of Evanston.
No, it is not a police-powered code. It is, in Illinois, for better or for worse, unfortunately, it is a guide. It is, does not carry the full weight of law like the zoning ordinance does, or a subdivision ordinance.
Do you agree with staff's comments, and please add any of your own, that we meet most, if not all, of the recommendations that are contained in the downtown plan?
Yes, I do. I mean, it's significant that when you look at the mapping for the form-based code of the downtown, it really envisions this site as very regular. It looks at it as though it were a rectangular site. So therefore, it says 4 to 8 stories. When you actually look at the unusual shape and the narrowing of the site as it goes to the north, you realize that it needs more design considerations than simply blocking out at 4 to 8 stories. So as you work within the context and go to 3 and 4 stories and then up to the 133 feet that's being proposed, it really is consistent with the guidelines that talk about the housing stock and offering buyers and renters desirable range of choices in terms of style and price. The downtown should be an attractive, convenient, and economically vital center of diverse activity. So it really meets the policy statements contained within the downtown plan and is really consistent from a land use standpoint with that downtown plan.
You've heard the testimony of Mr. McLean, which talked about not just the number of units as being the real ultimate decider of density. Do you agree with that, that these type of units may have less people density than a development that's more two-unit building,
Yeah.
2 units?
And the size of the units is going to dictate that to a large degree. One of the things that I found significant in the comprehensive general plan was the discussion that 43% of Evanston residents who are employed work within the community. And within that, 14% of those walk to work. So you have really a very pedestrian-oriented community, and that is really exaggerated within the downtown core. So this is exactly the type of development that it was envisioned, where you are encouraging more pedestrian and bicycle-oriented development and activity within that downtown core.
And considering that we have a taller building, bulkier building next to us, is it your opinion that this building is absolutely appropriate for its location here today?
It's absolutely appropriate. It's clearly envisioned in the D3 zoning district. The fact is that you have 50 feet at some point between these buildings. There's an extraordinary amount of space between buildings in the city of Evanston. You don't have that kind of space between buildings. In the single-family neighborhood that I lived in Evanston, in northwest Evanston, on 50-foot lots, we had 10 feet between buildings. And that worked just fine. So I think that this is absolutely appropriate. It's consistent with the trend of development. It's consistent with the comprehensive plans that have been prepared and adopted by the city of Evanston. And in my opinion, it's a perfectly reasonable and appropriate development.
Nothing further, Mr. Lennon.
Thank you.
Mr. Morose, if we can here, can you please state your name, occupation, professional qualification? Excuse me.
Ma'am, we're going to have to ask you to leave if you interrupt. The only way we can get
Well,
through
sir,
this,
I don't appreciate being snickered at by
I
the presentation.
I don't think there's any snickering, but I do hear a lot of comments, and we need to hear the witnesses. And then when it's time for those who are opposed to make comments, we'll try to listen to everyone who's opposed. And we'll ask the petitioner not to interrupt if they do so.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Michael, could you please state your name, address, professional qualifications, and whether or not you've ever testified in a matter such as this before?
Michael S. Maroos, president of Maroos and Company in Park Ridge, Illinois, 300 South Northwest Highway. I have testified in matters similar to this in probably 30 suburbs in the city of Chicago. I've been a real estate appraiser for the last 38 years. I've held the MAI designation for over 30 years and have appraised probably 11,000 properties throughout the country, and also have done significant work in the city of Evanston and for the city of Evanston. We just appraised the Harley Clark Mansion as part of what the city wants to do with it. So we've been involved with Manor Lifeways, Whole Foods, Westminster Place, and many of the downtown projects.
It's a simple question. Do you believe that this project, if approved as a special use, will have any adverse impact on surrounding property values, and could you tell us what that opinion is based on?
My job was to study that question with particular consideration for the immediate neighborhood in the south adjoining 15-story condominium development. After reviewing the plans, after my experience in Evanston in similar situations, and also looking what could be developed on the property, consider both are basically mid-block locations and the zoning of the area, and then looking at a matched pair analysis in my 25-page report, it's my opinion there will be no negative adverse impact per two sections of your zoning ordinance.
When you say a matched pair report, could you just briefly explain what that means?
Basically, you go out and try and find similar situations. And in this situation, we looked at Optima Tower several blocks away. It's got a J-shaped configuration. And we looked at sales and resales in that development with particular attention to what was driving value, and clearly view, height, and corner locations, and the condition, the layout of the unit are the critical factors, and also in the last few years market conditions, which kind of put a halt to a lot of economic growth. And in that development, they've got a section kind of in the middle where it J's, where the building basically is only about 20 feet apart from each other. And the clear differentiation in value were higher floors in the corner units.
So because those units, is it fair, I'm going to paraphrase this, and then you can explain, tell me if I'm right or wrong, but because those units in effect there were even closer, 20 feet apart, that didn't affect the valuation. It was whether you were higher up in the building or lower up in the building.
Or on a corner. The corners and the higher up and the premium views is what dictated value, which really, again, by what could be developed on this property reflected as plans so designed and so tailored that, in my opinion, there wouldn't be any negative impact on value.
Thank you. I have no further questions at this time.
I don't believe the report has been provided to the members of the commission, and so we have a pretty unsupported conclusion. I think it needs to be provided to the commission members. It needs to be posted online.
We will do all the above and provide direct copies to the objectors' attorneys.
And possibly there'll be questions, and the commission isn't able to ask questions without seeing the report, so on future dates, the witness might have to return.
He will return it all, but we will provide copies to everybody. We'll post it, we'll supply it to the objectors' counsel and anybody else from the objectors who want to see that report.
Does that conclude that testimony?
That concludes our direct testimony. Our witnesses are, of course, here today, and we'll be back to answer any questions or provide any rebuttal testimony for this meeting.
We've been going for about an hour and a half. I suggest we take about a 10-minute break and then resume with questions for the witnesses at 8:40.
Thank you.
Hearing is now back in session, it's about 8:43. During the break, I received a request for continuance to present evidence and rebuttal testimony from Howard Ellman, who lives within 1,000 feet of the subject property. And under the commission rules, that continuance will be granted so that his clients who object to the proposal can find witnesses and respond to what's been presented. We have a number of people here from the public and who might have some questions or statements. And we also have some commissioners who might have some questions or statements, some things they would like clarified. So we are going to have cross-examination in the next continued date, but let me see if commissioners have things like still fresh in their mind that they'd like clarified. Mr. Ford, is it ready?
Yeah, I think, Mr. Chairman, this may be a question for staff rather than for the developer, and it goes to the parking question. 1,400 spaces in the Maple Avenue garage, of which approximately 800 are leased, and I think what you said was that when that garage was built, it was intended to serve buildings which might be built in the vicinity. So that leasing spaces in that garage for surrounding residential properties was part of the original intent. Did I get that correct?
That is correct.
Is there, in the city's mind, an upper limit to the number of leases that you would grant in that garage? Is there some number that you would keep available to the public, or would the city be really happy if they could lease out all 1,400 spaces?
I talked to our parking division manager today, and he did not express that there is a limit to how many parking spaces the city is willing to lease. I doubt that we would go up to the maximum. Ultimately, these structures are supposed to not only serve the surrounding developments, but the visitors and employees of the downtown area. So there's always that cushion that needs to be left. What that is, I'm not sure. But nonetheless, that's something that the city would have to evaluate if we would approach that 80–90% occupancy of the parking deck, such as the Sherman Plaza parking structure, which is at about 90% occupied, perhaps even higher. And the developer had expressed interest in possibly leasing parking spaces from that parking deck. And the staff's response to that was that parking deck is occupied at a significant capacity. So we said that the 1,800 Maple Avenue garage has a lot more capacity, and if any parking spaces are to be leased for this development, that would be the appropriate garage.
So your judgment, or the parking manager's judgment, is that you are not significantly cutting into the public's parking pool by leasing these 100 spaces?
Not at all.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Yes, I have a question of Mr. Worthman. Can you tell me what the parking situation is south of Lake Street? Are there any restrictions? I don't believe it's metered south of Lake Street, but are there any restrictions to public parking there?
I may be answering for that question if the applicant is not able to.
Whatever. Yeah.
I went into about a 2-block radius, which stopped at Lake Street.
Okay.
So I'm going to defer. And,
Okay, thanks.
no problem.
So I did research the area, drove around to look at what the parking signs say, and there's a variety of parking restrictions depending on what street you're on. For example, Oak Street south of Grove, all the way down to Dempster's that I looked, there are no restrictions. The only restrictions are just for street cleaning and snow emergencies. For Maple Avenue, north of Dempster to Lake, the east side has residential permit F parking and then 2-hour limit 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. and then the west side has no restrictions. Elmwood Avenue, south of Lake Street, also has the residential permit F parking with the 2-hour limitation 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. for those that do not have permits. And I believe that covers the streets. I also looked at Greenleaf that goes east-west. East of Oak, the south side has the residential F permit parking with the 2-hour limitation 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. for those that do not have permits.
Are you talking about Greenwood or Greenleaf?
Greenleaf, which is further south of Lake, it goes east-west. The north side of Greenleaf has no restrictions. There are some single-family homes, and there's limited parking available due to the driveways. There are signs that say you can't park within 8 feet of any driveway, so there's really limited amount of parking there. I believe that covers my...
Okay, the street south of Lake Street, Maple, there are no restrictions on dwellings on the west side of that street. Is that right, from Lake Street to Greenwood? No restrictions on the west side of Maple? Is that right?
Correct. There are no restrictions between Dempster and Lake on the west side.
Tell me about the east side again of Maple, south of Lake.
Maple, south of Lake on the east side, the residential permit F parking is in effect. So the residents that live in that stretch of Maple Avenue are eligible to buy the permit parking, and then they can park at any time with no limitations. The people without the permits are restricted to 2-hour parking between 9 a.m. and 6 p.m.
Okay, so would it be your opinion that there's going to be no appreciable pressure on the residents south of Lake Street on Maple and Oak and so on?
Staff's opinion is that if there are any demands for on-street parking spaces by residents who choose not to park their vehicles at the Maple Avenue garage, that impact on the surrounding street network will be not significant, minimal. Because there are certain areas that do not have restrictions, and there may be residents who choose to park there, or guests of residents who choose to park there on certain occasions. But when considered in conjunction with the distance from the development, the fact that the residents will likely have a reduced number of vehicles due to the location of the development where they live, and the fact that those that do choose to have parking spaces, they will have the opportunity to park within an enclosed structure, protected from the elements, only 2 blocks away, so the same distance as that on the street, and they don't have to worry about street cleaning, snow emergencies, or driving around to find a parking spot.
That's your opinion?
Correct.
Thank you.
Anything else from the commission? The members of the public have questions. And could you come, let me swear anyone else that's going to talk. Raise your right hand. You swear or affirm that you will tell the truth in this hearing.
Yes.
So what I'm soliciting is questions. And sometimes people like to make arguments in the form of questions. At this point, it would be nice to have questions rather than arguments. Ma'am, can you come forward and identify yourself? And
Mr. Chairman, may I interrupt for a moment? I do have one more question.
okay.
This has to do with affordable units, and I remember this was first raised when we considered the North Shore Hotel improvements, and I'm wondering if this might be direct to the city. Has there been any any movement on that front?
If you're asking about the affordable housing ordinance,
Something akin to that applying to rental units.
Is there any agreement on?
currently, there is no requirement for affordable housing units to be provided within rental developments. The city is in the process of reviewing our affordable housing ordinance right now. Staff also discussed this with the developer, and at this moment, the proposal does not include any units that are affordable. Per the
I
definition of
understand that.
affordability.
I would just urge the city to get moving on this.
Thank you, sir. We will.
Ma'am?
Yes. Hi, I'm Lucy Miller, and I live at the 1 Evanston building, and I would make a request that the renderings that they show be more realistic. They show a blind wall facing the new development, and we have total windows along that whole stretch that faces north. And that was really a selling point for our building. Obstructing that, I think, just eliminates or diminishes our value. So if you could see a picture, an actual photo, or draw those in, I think that would give you a better idea of where we stand.
I think everyone on the commission has been to the site.
Very good.
That is our custom.
Okay, but it's not rendered that way. It's sort of a false impression that you get. Okay.
Ma'am?
Debbie Magnuson. I just have a question regarding parking as well. I know that there's a new rental facility, I think it's 350 units.
Right, E2.
Going just a block north of the city parking lot that you're saying that there's going to be 100 available parking spaces. So with 300 additional rental spaces, rentals on the corner of Maple and Emerson, where are those people going to park? Because that's going to be less than 1,000 feet walking distance to the city garage. And I can tell you my office is at 1821 Benson, another less than 1,000 feet, and oftentimes I can't park in front of my office. So parking is a concern of mine.
So if your question is if the development at E2 has come to an agreement to park within the Maple Avenue garage, am I correct?
My question is, do you know what the parking situation is for the brand-new rental building that's already built? It isn't occupied yet, but it's a brand-new building on the corner of Maple and Emerson.
I don't have that information readily available, but I should be able to find that within a few minutes.
That would be really helpful for everyone to know.
Someone else?
My name's Karen Wenner. I also live at 1 Evanston. It's a question for you guys. What are the planned rents going to be? I mean, I know this is not like low-income housing. What are you guys planning on charging for the units?
The rents will vary. Obviously, the market will dictate where we will end up being able to charge. They will be online with the current Class A product in the market. They are significantly smaller than a lot of the existing product on the market. Thus, their so-called chunk price, or the real price of what somebody actually has to pay to live in our building, will be less than it would be at, would likely be less than it would be at like an Amway or a 1717 or an E2, which has a larger percentage of 2 and 3 bedroom units. We expect the rents to be as low as potentially $1,400 and possibly as high as $2,800, which would be right in line, perhaps a little bit lower than some of the other Class A apartments in the existing market. I will point out that by providing an option that does not require you to have a car, which Amley and 1717 are properties that do require a car to get around Evanston, that national studies indicate that's a savings of at least $10,000 a year in your overall cost of living in an urban environment.
Anyone else have questions at this time?
I'm not just sure exactly who to direct this to, but the mirror, the American with Disabilities Act requires that all the common areas conform to the act. Was this part of your discussion with the developer?
Yes, and probably the developer and the architect can speak to that. When they design these new buildings, they're all ADA accessible with elevators, and so all parts of the building have to be accessible, so they are. I also was able to find the information regarding the parking arrangement for the E2 building. They are providing 353 parking spaces on site at a ratio of approximately 1 to 1. And they're not required to lease any parking spaces from the Maple Avenue garage.
Anyone else? Could you come forward and use the microphone? Yes, please. Or we can give you the portable mic.
Oh, I think I'm just fine. I had the impression there'd be a time when brief statements from people who think they're being affected by this could speak. When will that time be?
Well, we usually want to do it after the questions, but if you don't want to come back, I think we could try to accommodate that.
I'll speak.
First, let me get your name on the record if you're willing to
My
provide.
name is Sally Henderson. I live at 1570 Elmwood Avenue, which is the Evanston 1 building, which is directly adjacent to the building being proposed. And this will be the third time I've heard the presentation, and the more I hear it, the more wonderful it sounds. To be honest, there are a lot of very good thoughts about it. I have one problem only. I think it's going to hurt the people in my building greatly. We're concerned, many of us, about the height of a building, however distant or close it may affect the light. When you go through buildings going north, you don't have the sun, and we're concerned about that. We're concerned about a lack of privacy. Even at a certain distance, there'll still be a much more dense population. There'll be much more noise. There'll be much more moving in and moving out. If they're young people, they may have other kind of social issues of the day that would not be particularly to our liking. I live in a wonderful building right now, and the people behave beautifully. So we're concerned about what it's going to do to the quality of our life. But the most important thing for me, if I may speak candidly, is what it's going to do to my income. I moved here because I have health issues, and I wanted to be close to one of my daughters. I have a fixed income. My husband died several years ago. I had it carefully planned. One of the things I did was to invest in a condominium, because I was sure after we made it through 2008, it could never be quite that awful again. And I thought, at least I'll break even, and there'll be money left for my children, if not for my medical needs. I have a serious health issue, but I live a good life. I'm not falling apart today. But I do have another concern, which is not only investment for my future medical needs, but as fate tells a joke sometimes, I have a daughter with serious health issues, and she won't have any support if I can't provide it. I'm very concerned about what this is going to do to the value of my property. I think there's an impression that those of us who live in One Evanston are all, rich fat cats. I live in the smallest place I have ever lived in my life, and I do that so that I can take care of the income that I do have. I live a modest life. I have an older car. There isn't anything glamorous about how I'm living except the view. And that seems to be in a threat. And I don't buy that 50 feet is somehow a luxurious distance. Not when you have 122 units of people crowded into them. And there won't be just one person per unit. But as I say, my biggest issue is the fact that my money is going to be diminished by this. And I think that's hideously unfair, to be honest with you. I realize that city governments have the option to make decisions, but be aware that they're real human beings with real needs. that are being impacted. If I hear one more time, does this negatively affect anybody? I don't know what I'm gonna do. Of course it negatively affects us. If you had my income and you had to see 25 or 30% of it go away in terms of your real estate investment, you'd say, gee, I don't feel too comfortable with this plan. So I wanted to say that, and I only ask that you put yourself in my place and see how I might feel about this, and other people who live in the building, and the precedent that will be set so that when someone wants to build a tower on the south side, that's 12 or 14 or 15 stories high, all those property values can go away too. It's a very serious decision you're making on an untested product, since I only heard it being 6 of these units being proposed for development. There's no track record on this. But I do know there's a track record on the value of real estate going down. So I appreciate your listening.
Well,
May I make a statement, sir?
please.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I think Evanston is a stunning building.
We like it too, and even more stunning are the residents that live there.
And tell us your name.
I am Dr. Catherine Boho. I and my 5 siblings were born and raised in this fine city of Evanston. My dad was a proud fireman for the city of Evanston. Thus, I am disgusted and I am quite dismayed that once again I find myself appearing before this membership to plead for the protection of the integrity and value of my Evanston home at 1570 Elmwood Avenue. Several years back, I appeared before you asking you to disallow the Winthrop Club development due to concern regarding traffic problems, congestion, and potential obstruction of my beautiful view of the Chicago skyline. You nonetheless approved the development thereof, causing all concerns to become a reality. Subsequently, I moved into the premier building you approved, hoping to regain my amazing view, for which I paid well over $500,000, including enhancements and upgrades. This time, before I and my wife purchased, I also checked with the city about the empty lot and was told nothing over 5 stories would be allowed to be built there because of the downtown plan that was adopted by the city council in 2009. It was my understanding that the same information was posted on the city's website. I thought at that time that the city was being honest with me, and therefore we went ahead and purchased our home. Now, here I am again, asking the city of Evanston to please protect the integrity and value of our homes at 1570 Elmwood Avenue by saying no to the oversized, intimidating construction proposed at 1571 Maple. If you approve this building, you will not only steal our beautiful city views, once again, but you also obstruct our right to daytime brightness. Many of us live on the north side of the building, and thus, since we do not have exposure to the sun, depend on the natural light of day to brighten our homes. The development by its well over code height would indeed deprive us of this. It's interesting to me that the developer stood here just earlier concerned about lighting the sidewalk, but has no concern about the individual residents within 1 Evanston. By allowing construction of this building, you would also be setting negative precedents to a city that has been and should continue to be moving toward visual coherence. Most construction already developed does reflect visual coherence because they have been constructed with regard for aesthetic principles of balance, proportion, tonality, and harmony. The proposed development significantly lacks in all of the above areas. If you approve construction of the 1571 Maple Avenue, you will not only diminish the visual coherence of our beautiful city, but also set precedent for further construction of one high-rise on top of another, thus usurping the wonderful amenities homeowners pay for. At this point, I take to task Mr. Don Wilson, Alderman of the 4th Ward. On his Facebook post, he suggests that responsible development is an important issue of concern here in the city of Evanston. It appears from our last meeting and by his dismal warning of it could be worse, that he is in favor of this proposed construction, which is in total dissonance with his Facebook post. Mr. Wilson should remember that he was elected to reflect the needs and protection of his constituency. The approval of the development of 1571 Maple would absolutely set bad precedent for further construction in our amazing city. Furthermore, with the near completion of the 2 new apartment buildings in Evanston and Emerson, and the well over 2,000 listings for apartment rentals, all of which have significant parking, is it really necessary to build another rental in Evanston? I feel that such a development will tend to glut our beautiful community rather than enhance it. I, as a resident of this community, I, who was born and raised, and am proud to say so, in Evanston, am pleading with the city government to start protecting the harmony and happiness of its residents rather than catering to the monetary wants of outsiders. And one last comment. I have lived in downtown Evanston for over 12 years. I've lived at Church Street Station, Sherman Plaza, and now 1 Evanston. And I can tell you, through daily actual experience, the comments that were made about lack of traffic congestion, etc., is not true. I see it and experience it daily. And Damar, I'd like to know who you work for, the city of Evanston or the developers? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, would you permit a comment again?
Go ahead.
Ms. Boho, I'm also a native of Evanston, and you and I have seen tremendous change in downtown Evanston, especially since 1970. I was on the plan, I'm no longer a voting member of the Plan Commission, I'm an associate member. But I was on the commission as a voting member when Evanston 1 was being proposed for construction. And I remember the neighbors immediately to the west, which is an 8-story complex. They had the same concerns and the same objections that you are now expressing.
Yeah, go ahead.
Jeff, come on.
So I would like to get kind of clarification on what is being asked for as far as height. Is it true? I think this is kind of a 2-part question. First, I think is for Demir. Is it, so what's allowable on the site is an 8-story building plus a 40-foot parking? Is that true?
That's correct.
Okay, so, and then, so that's a 120-foot tall building, and what's being asked for is a 133-foot
So the code would allow 125 total with 4 levels of parking. The current proposal is for the maximum height of 133.3 feet.
Okay, so we're talking about 8 feet of...
Actually, we don't have any parking.
I see.
So the 4 levels of parking would not be counted.
I see, okay.
But what we do have is a section in the ordinance on development allowances, which can be included in the PUD. And the standards relating to those, so far as I can count, unless there's in excess, there's a maximum in some of the development allowances. And if you're not over the maximum, there are no special standards.
Okay,
Other than the general standards for approving the PUD. And ordinance allows for some things
there's no limit. But it has to be, the commission has to make a statement as to whether the project with development allowances meets the standards. And then if they're in excess of one of the maximums, then the city council has to make similar findings and the 2/3 votes required. I'm not sure that anything is above the maximum. So there's a lot of standards.
Okay, all right, and then the other question that I have is, there was a massing diagram within the report that showed a building that was massed in kind of an L shape that ran the continuous length of the south property line, 25 feet back. It was about an 8-story building. Would that be a project, if they were to have developed the project that way, of a 85-story, 85-foot or a 120-foot building along the south side, that would have been not requiring this special permitting? It would have been within the ordinance?
Well, because of the scale, that what you're referring to is an exhibit within the packet that the applicant submitted indicating a potential type of development that meets all bulk requirements that would not require site development allowances. Any project this scale has to be processed as a planned development. So it would have to go through this process of Plan Commission, City Council, regardless if they have any development allowances or no. But what you're referring to was a proposal for what a potential development could look like. Obviously, they would have to meet the design guidelines and et cetera.
Thank you. Mr. Ford?
Question, or since we know, Mr. Chairman, we're going to have a continuance here, I want to give the developer a little project. If I am on, say, the 6th floor of 1 Evanston, if I live all the way on the east end of the floor, I'm looking past the new building. And if I live all the way on the west end, I'm looking past the building. And if I live in the middle, I'm looking right at it. Could you calculate or diagram the site angles that occur in a row of apartments across the north face of 1 Evanston, so that we could get a sense of, if I'm standing with my nose on the window in the worst possible location, how wide is the building in front of me visually? It would help to have that.
We will provide that prior to the next hearing.
Thanks.
Sir?
We'll need some help providing that.
I think we can work with staff in terms of getting the layout of some of the legal layout. I think he has it. We need the layout of the building.
Yeah. I have some remarks and some exhibits attached, which I can provide to you, if I'd like them as part of the record if possible.
Let me look for a minute. Could I ask you to speak at the next meeting? Because technically this kind of extensive exhibit needs to be provided in advance. So if you can provide it and then address it at the next meeting, then we'd be consistent with the rules.
I'd be happy to do that. The exhibits simply are the full text of things that I've mentioned in my comments.
Can I have this posted also as part of the record for the case?
By all means, and I'll provide copies to council.
And we look forward to hearing from you. Let me get your name just for the record.
Douglas Fuson, F-U-S-O-N.
Thanks. And I appreciate your being willing to give that testimony at the next meeting so everybody has had a chance to look at it. I'll give them to the staff and they'll post and we'll all get electronic copies.
Thank you.
You can say the others. Mr. Peters, another comment if I may. The Plan Commission considered developing a downtown plan in 2007. It was in committee for at least a year, and it was before the full plan commission for another year. And in 2009, we delivered a 120-page plan to council. Are you telling me now, Demir, that that is simply advisory? That the downtown plan is just advisory?
That's correct.
What did they do with it? What did they do with the downtown plan?
What he really means is that the comprehensive plan is advisory, but in review for the courts, in reviewing zoning changes, finding the developments, will consider conformance with the comprehensive plan.
I'm talking about the downtown plan.
It's part of the comprehensive plan. And the downtown plan, conformity to these plans is one of the standards. So.
But this is not it does not conform to the downtown plan.
Well, that's one of the issues that we'll have to look at, because
It's a significant departure, as a matter of fact.
it's one of those things that we have to look at, which is.
Okay.
Yeah.
You just said the downtown plan is part of the comprehensive plan. My understanding was that that was not the case, that the comprehensive plan had been adopted by council and the downtown plan had not.
Let me ask, I assumed that the downtown plan had been adopted by council. Did they adopt it by ordinance?
Yes, the plan is adopted by the city council. However, it is a guideline. It is not a code. Neither is the comprehensive plan. Both documents serve as the guideline, provide a vision, and are used to draft ordinances that have to be followed. Some of the standards do relate to plans, comprehensive plan, area plans, etc., and state that projects should be substantially consistent with these documents.
Is the downtown plan incorporated by reference?
It is not specifically incorporated by reference. It's one of the things that didn't happen. I'm just the chair here, and I know the lawyers will give us extensive argument on those questions. And then the city will have to do it too. Sir?
Mr. Chairman, my name is Thomas Ramsdell. I'm the attorney for 1 Evanston, and Mr. Ellman, its president, who submitted the continuance letter. And I just wanted to clarify, in connection with our cross-examination and case we put on at the continued hearing, we will submit all materials that are extensive or exemplary, et cetera, to the city and to the commission.
If you give it
in advance.
to Demir, and what's the timing on that?
Depends on the continued date.
I mean, but how many days before the?
Most likely about 2 weeks prior to the continued date.
Well, I'm not arguing with you, but I thought the packet for this presentation was on October 31st, 4 business days ago, was when it was posted.
Online, that's correct.
Okay, so you would like it 2 weeks in advance?
That's correct.
So we don't need to do this now, but we need to think about the date and what we need to do before.
I think we have to be sure there's enough time for you to find the witnesses and do the analysis.
We have a team here ourselves. We have an expert land use planner, we have an expert appraiser, and we have an expert architect, excuse me. So they're gonna need some time to review and digest this when we think about our continued hearing date. If you want to do that now, I can stand here, otherwise I will cease and desist.
If we think about the dates, it's possible, the room is available, and presumably the commissioner.
I'm gonna grab my calendar too, if you don't mind, step
On
on
the 3rd and the 10th. Where is my calendar? But I would think we'd want to go to the 10th to have enough time. Unless you're really speedy.
Yeah, well, we have, we do have some time this month. Obviously, Thanksgiving's gonna get, if we could turn this over, I would say Thanksgiving's late, so I don't mean to mumble into this thing, but I think if you've got some thoughts on this.
If the continued hearing is on December 10th, we can probably accept the documents after Thanksgiving.
Okay, that's fine.
fine with that date. We remember, we had already ourselves asked for continuance to push the hearings to
Yeah.
today. So this has been going on for some time, but the tension is for us. And they've already hired their witnesses.
We just have to be sure to announce the date tonight.
10th is fine for us.
My concern is whether the appraiser will have whether that's enough time for him. Can we get back or within a couple of days, have a chance for us to talk amongst ourselves?
Yeah, I hate to take committee's time now, so we're working here.
Yeah.
Can we report by Friday?
No, we need a date certain.
We have to do a
We have
date
to do a
certain
date
tonight.
certain.
Well, you guys had.
I don't understand.
And we need, the 10th works for everybody.
Well,
But it might not work for us.
It doesn't work for everybody.
And
It doesn't work.
we just got their packet on Friday, 4 days ago.
I understand.
So maybe we should be looking at January.
Our next.
The packet was available at staff, they knew all about the packet a month ago.
No, that's not
They've been meeting with us for months, they knew all about it, and the purpose of the continuance is for them to be able to hire witnesses. The testimony here today is they have their witnesses.
Yeah,
Over a month is more than sufficient
Mr.
time
Citron has
for
had
them to do it.
at least a half a year to work on this. We've had about 2 days with some of our witnesses. I think to be fair to our witnesses, we have Thanksgiving coming up, we have the holidays approaching. It is not inappropriate or unreasonable to ask that we move this either a little later in December or into January.
Absolutely unreasonable. It's a month and a week if we go to the.
There's nothing unreasonable. In fact, I think it's required under law some reasonable time.
Chairman, I'd like to make a quick comment. It's Mario Tretto, Assistant City Attorney. We also need to just remind everyone that we need to finish this within 120 days of the day that it was opened.
Well, arguably tonight, I think the hearing really
The hearing
begins
opened.
tonight.
I would agree with that.
Although technically, we continued it at the last meeting.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I've been talking to my client, we did need to go to the 17th to give another week from that, we would be willing to do that. It would work with our witnesses. Mike, can you do the 17th? Yeah. We'll give it.
But let me ask the commission members if
we could do the 17th.
if the 17th is workable.
It'll be okay.
Your Honor, on behalf of One Evanston, the 17th would also work for us if that's available to the commission.
If the commission, and can you check the room? We need a place. It doesn't work on the grass in December. So it appears that 17th is workable, although I'm not sure what room we'll be in, but we'll try to work that out. Is there anyone else who wants to make a statement? Or ask questions at this time? I have a few requests. What is it we, oh, ma'am, go ahead.
I'm going to make a statement. I'm Doreen Haggerty. I'm a resident of 1020 Grove. Our building is located 1.5 blocks from the corner of the construction on Maple. I am here on behalf of a number of residents in our building who have signed a petition expressing concern about the failure of the developer to include parking spaces on site for all the 101 apartments and 3 businesses that are likely to be there. 1020 Grove is a 9-story building, has 45 apartments, and the petition has been signed by 36 residents from a total of 44.
Did you observe each of the signatures?
Yes, I did.
And you've been sworn under oath already? Did you?
I swear.
Okay, then in that case, we can accept the petition.
These resident signatures, for the most part, were collected after a resident council meeting at 1020 Grove. And those that were not at the resident council meeting were sent a notice that we would be doing this. And I went around and met with any of those who agreed to sign. I also should note about our building that we do have parking for everybody who is in the building. I have a second petition, and that one is a petition based on the same premises, signed by King Home residents, which is at 1555 Oak Avenue, directly across the street from 1020 Grove. It was circulated by Douglas Galbraith, who is the resident council chair at the King Home, as I am at 1020 Grove. The King Home petition includes 35 resident signatures from a potential of 39 residents. From both buildings, the total resident signatures is 71.
We'll be able to take the petition on your testimony that you saw all the signatures, but we're unable to take the petition where we don't have someone here to swear that they saw all the signatures.
Okay, so I will just talk about 1020 Grove at this point then.
That'd be fine.
Okay. Our concern about parking, let me read you the petition. The petition says that we request that the Evanston Plan Commission recommend to the City Council that they deny the construction permit to the developer until the plan includes suitable on-site parking for all apartments and commercial use employees. Why this is important to us? Our concerns about parking in this new building derive from the current shortfall of available parking spots on the streets near our building, as well as heavy traffic through the streets near our building. Where Grove and Oak Streets come together is a particularly bad one for us because it does seem as if the whole area is still primarily a residential space. The sources of the traffic at this point are the YMCA and the various people who come there. The transitioning traffic going from Church and, trying to avoid Church and Davis, going from Ridge to the west, towards the east, and going from Sheridan at the east, going towards the west. We have police and fire station vehicles that make a constant use of Grove Street, ambulances that are also involved in the same route. Drivers seeking parking in a neighborhood that has, as you've heard earlier, multi-story residential apartments lacking adequate parking on site, and bus and truck traffic that comes through at Oak and Grove. The traffic level also adds considerably to the noise level in the neighborhood throughout the day as well as during the evening. In addition, the residents at 1020 Grove frequently travel on foot en route to local stores or public transportation and back and forth between 1020 Grove and the King Home, both of which are Presbyterian home communities. The current proposal is not acceptable in terms of being a senior-friendly proposal, and I believe that Evanston does have an initiative saying that this is going to be a senior-friendly community. It's very difficult to get across the streets in Evanston, particularly downtown area. So we request that you not recommend the proposal as it currently is presented regarding the parking.
Thank you. Could you leave a copy of the petition with the address on my right, and that'll become part of the record. Anyone else? Anything else from the commission? My recollection is, if it's accompanied by an affidavit, we take it, but I'm not sure. I have to look at the rules. That be, well, you've testified to it, so it's in, that's in the record. So we can take the one from 1020. If there's nothing else, we need a motion to continue this hearing to December 17th in this building. We have a motion. Is there a second? All those in favor of this motion? So the hearing will be continued to our meeting on December 17th. I'm asking staff to provide a report on possible arrangements for leasing parking, since that's contemplated, and I'm quite certain the commission would want to have a condition in any approval with respect to the leasing. I'm asking for a report from the appraiser that be provided within the next few days to the staff, so that can be posted. And I guess you've answered the other questions. And the applicant has agreed to provide a study of the sightlines from the building to the south and how they would be impacted by the proposal. So standard sightline study, I think. And with that, I stand I won't say adjournment, but having the hearing continued at this point. Thank you.
Thank you.